Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to appear today. I have a slightly nuanced talking point in technology risks in battery raw materials, and then discussing the effects of what we see post-COVID. As far as COVID's concerned, I believe it to have significant long-term battery material effects. There were a number of trends present pre-COVID, and I believe in a lot of cases those trends have been accelerated as a result of COVID decision-making. Let's talk about power. In power globally, solar has become cheaper than coal on an installed basis in the last 2 to 3 years. And solar and storage is forecast largely by virtue of battery cost deflation to become cheaper than gas peaking power by the end of the decade.
Question about has Australia experienced the effects of other countries and how we've been able to adapt? Well, in Australia, we class mining as an essential service, and mining has been one of the operating mines has been one of the industries that's helped sustain revenues and exports during this COVID time. The other thing that I would say is that the government in Australia very quickly shut down mining exploration in areas close to Aboriginal communities, and that was able to stop the COVID spread into those vulnerable communities. So that's where I've seen this adaptation due to the COVID problem.
Look, to start with, it's actually, from the people I've spoken to, it's been quite surprising how little impact the pandemic has had on, let's say, operating rates and also production profiles. And of course, that's not discounting effectively the sort of, the velocity of a production that travels through the supply chain, because I'm sure obviously we're going to see a lack of demand further down the line, which might serve to crimp commodity exports, but more on that a little bit later. From an operational standpoint, really the major miners have dealt very well with COVID-19 in Australia. You might argue that there is certain amount of good fortune. The operating models, obviously the mine sites themselves are remote most of the time, and so therefore rely on a fly-in, fly-out workforce. So in terms of being able to segregate the workforce on site compared to other locations, they've been very successful.
Yes, it's Dale Cook here. I'm in Singapore. My company is DB3 Advisory. We provide business advisory services to mining and commodity clients, focusing on risk management, governance, and process improvement. One thing about the mining culture is, it has a history of being tough and a sense of bravado, but underneath it, we're all human, and so the issues around fear and that associates with that, anxiety, and then mental health are all real, but it's less talked about. And I know, dealing with some clients at the moment, they are concerned that the brave face is being put on by some of their employees, but as time goes on, they are concerned that their employees, like any other business, will rethink the ideas of drive in, drive out, or fly in, fly out, moving from one part of the world to the other, in the large groups of people who are on mine sites at times, and maybe limit their exposure or something.
In Australia, the collaboration I touched on, and Piers had touched on it earlier with respect to broader minerals in the battery supply chain, so nickel, manganese, cobalt, lithium. We are involved in a number of collaborative efforts to try and bring in not just, in our case, cobalt, but a higher grade of cobalt, and ultimately trying to make precursors in this country. So effectively the initial end of a battery industry, and there's no reason we can't do that. And in doing so, we'll bypass the refining industry globally. So I'm very pleased to say that I think in our industry, in battery materials, there's a lot of strong collaboration. It's relatively early days, but there's certainly some very positive work being done.
I think it's inevitable that we will be talking about RMB markets for for all commodities within a decade. It's undoubtedly, I mean, you can see the plans that have been put in place by the Chinese exchanges, that this is, this is their end game. And to a degree, it obviously is a way of, as the world's largest consumer of most commodities, it's a way of taking some control, or at least leveling the playing field, certainly in heavily concentrated commodities, to the supply side.
I think Australia will be favoured, and I think the iron ore producers will be able to continue to sell their medium grade iron ores, some at a discount with the lower grades. While these prices are high, they're making good revenue. It's a good distance between their mine gate operating prices and the what the market's prepared to pay for them with the spot prices.